My name is Emily Grange, and this is my read aloud. This is my book, Make Way for Ducklings. It's one of my favorite books. It's by Robert McCloskey. And this is my little sister, Elizabeth, and she's going to listen while I read today. Can you say hi, Elizabeth?
Hi!
Alright, so before we begin reading, we're going to take a look at this title, Make Way for Ducklings. What do you think this book's about, Elizabeth?
Ducky.
Duckies?
Mm-hmm.
Where are the duckies? Do you see any ducks?
Right there.
Right there? Can we count them together?
No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There are 5? Good
Yeah.
job. Let's count one more time together. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 ducks. Good job. So, we're going to read this book, Make Way for Ducklings. Are you ready? And we think it's about duckies. Now, what is a duckling? Is it a baby duck or a big duck?
Baby duck.
A baby duck, you're right. So, we're going to read this book to learn more about baby ducks, and I want you to pay special attention to the baby ducks and how they act versus the mama duck, because we're going to do a science lesson when we're finished about baby animals. So let's start the book. Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live. But every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There was sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles, so they flew on and on. Next morning, they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer, but the people in the boat threw peanuts into the water, so the Mallards followed them all around the pond and got another breakfast, better than the first. Do you like peanuts?
Yeah, look at that.
"I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard, as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had found a place that suited her. But... "Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard, all of a dither. "You'll get run over." And when she got her breath, she added, "Oh, this is no place for babies with all those horrid things rushing around. We'll have to look somewhere else." What is the boy riding?
Wedding.
He's riding a bike. Do you think that's good for ducks, or do you think the ducks are going to get run over by the bike? What do you think?
Good.
It's good. All right. So they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. They looked in Lewisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. Do ducks need water? Do they like to swim?
Mm-hmm.
Do you like to swim?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard.
Awesome.
"Oh, we can't swim right now, honey. We're reading a book." "Can we wait till after the book?" "Okay, thanks." "That island looks like a nice, quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks like just the right place to hatch ducklings." So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. Are they going to have baby ducks?
Yeah.
But of course they could swim. And one day they swam over to the park on the riverbank. And there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts. And after that, the mallards called on Michael every day.
I eat peanuts.
You want to eat peanuts? Who was giving the ducks the peanuts? Who do you think?
How's it?
Michael. Can you say Michael?
Michael.
He's a policeman. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael anymore because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water, or to have her lunch, or to count the eggs to make sure they were all there. Do you want to count the eggs with me?
Yeah.
Let's see if we can get to 8. 1,
1,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're all there. One day, the ducklings hatched. First came Jack, then Cack, and then Lack, then Mack and Knack, and Whack and Pack and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was a great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on. So he said, "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children." And she did. What do you think they're going to do together?
Just a baby egg.
You see the baby ducks?
Yes.
What do you think they're going to do with their mommy? Let's find out.
Right now.
She taught them how to swim and dive. She taught them to walk in a line, to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. What's going to happen next?
What happened next?
Let's find out.
Let's find out.
When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. There they waded ashore and waddled along till they came to the highway. What's on the highway, Elizabeth?
What happened?
The highway. What's on the road?
What's in road?
Do cars drive on the road?
Mm-hmm.
Is it dangerous for ducks to walk with cars? Do they have to be careful?
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the road. Honk, honk! Went the horns and the speeding car. Quack! Said Mrs. Mallard as she tumbled back again. Quack, 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 quack! Went Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking. They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. What does a whistle sound like?
What is the sound?
No. What does a whistle sound like?
What?
Does it sound like... Is that what a whistle sounds like?
No.
Yes.
No.
He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way the policemen do for Mrs. Mallard. As soon as Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. He called Clancy at headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducks walking down the street." Clancy said, "Family of what?" "Ducks!" yelled Michael. "Send a police car, quickly!" Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had reached the corner bookshop and turned into Charles Street with Jack, Clack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, all marching in line behind her. Everyone stared An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Isn't it amazing?" And the man who swept the street said, "Well now, ain't that nice?" And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was so proud, she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was a police car with 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic so Mrs. Mallard and the Ducklings could march across the street. What does marching look like, Elizabeth? How do you march?
How much?
Can you show me? Can you stand up? How do you march? Can you show me?
How much?
Ready? Stand up. Stand up. And we can march. 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 Good job. All right, let's see what happens to the ducks. Oh, you already read that page. They marched right on into the public garden. Inside the gate, they all turned round to say thank you to the policemen. The policemen smiled and waved goodbye. When they reached the pond and swam across to the little island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for them, just as he had promised. The ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long, they followed the swan boats and eat peanuts.
And I peanut.
Yes, you do.
Eat peanut.
And when night falls, they swim to their little island and go to sleep. The end. Did you like that book? High five.
Come with peanut.
High five.
Come with peanut.
Good job.
Come with peanut.
All right.